Hello and welcome to Patito's Gang. I'm Nenna Jimie. Nigeria is Africa's giant, but according to recent studies, Nigeria is one of the poorest countries in the world. How did this disconnect actually happen? Well, let's join the gang in the studio and hear from them.
Well, consciousness in Nigeria was raised again recently regarding the subject of poverty. Study that came out of Brookings suggested that Nigeria had finally overtaken India in the wrong direction as the biggest collection of extremely poor people in the world. How can a country so endowed in human and material resources be the home of the people who live in the greatest misery? That's a puzzle, but that's our reality. How do we engage the Nigerian condition, recognizing this reality? Why is there extreme poverty? A country that has so many talented people, has so much by way of natural endowments. So, what can we do about it? Can we now become, if you will, energized by this negative piece of news to deal with poverty up front? What's the problem? Why are we so poor? And actually pretend that we are rich. Because one of the biggest problems I find with Nigeria is this view that Nigeria is a rich country. Nigeria, and I said, please.
Nigeria is a rich country. Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa. Yeah. All those things. And the development thing that you mentioned, I know some economists have also come out and say that for leading indicators, lagging indicators, by the time you put in the infrastructures, by the time they begin to multiply themselves, we begin to see the growth. But the truth of the matter is that the poverty level, by my own way of measuring, is waking up in the morning, and my neighbor who has worked in an oil company over the years, for over 30 years, and who has done well, say in the past 10 years, knocks my door and tells me, oh boy, please can I get 5,000 naira? And I say, come on, you must be kidding. 5,000 naira, because I don't have 5,000 naira that I need to go and use to pursue what is being owed to me outside. Like you said, a lot of pretense, a lot of grandstanding. It has not been inclusive. Whatever indicator.
Maybe that throws up the fact that we need to begin to actually say, what really is poverty? What is extreme poverty? There are numbers that have been thrown out by the UN and this and this and that. But I like to take a metaphor, Tony's metaphor, to describe extreme poverty. Tony's metaphor essentially says that the poor, or the peasant, talks about peasant, is so deep in water that even a ripple can drown him. There are people.
I think that it's important for us to do that because there are many metrics to measure the poverty. The financial one, the borderline of $1.90 per day, which comes to, if you use 22 working days a month in Nigeria, would come to about 15,000 naira a month. That is just one metric.
And we're debating
minimum wage. So our minimum wage ensures that everybody at minimum wage remains at extreme, not just poverty, but extreme poverty. Yes, extreme poverty. But beyond the financial measure, there are the socioeconomic measures, the infrastructure, what I call the social safety net. So your access to potable water, access to sanitation, access to shelter, access to food, access to healthcare. Those things also form part of what combined is what we consider extreme poverty. In Nigeria, for example, there was a research done by UNICEF in 771 local governments. Mind you, we have 774. There is open defecation practiced. The research showed that 25% of Nigerians engage in open defecation. Open defecation means you don't have access to sanitation. Access to sanitation is one measure of extreme poverty. access to quality education, not just schooling. We know, especially in the northern part of Nigeria, we have, I think, is this 7 out of 10 children that are out of school? All those are measures of extreme poverty. So even if we don't even go to the financial metrics, we need to understand that 122,000 people die in Nigeria every year from dysentery. 90% are children. Dysentery is an issue of access to water, access to sanitation.
So we are talking about poverty. I think that needs to be defined in 2 ways. There is a mental poverty. Nigerians, we have issue when it comes to understanding what poverty is all about. You can be mentally poor. That does not mean that your environment is poor. But like you said earlier about the government making policies to make these peasant poor people more poorer, there must be a holistic idea, a holistic study that can be able to bring people out of poverty.
There's no need for that study. So why I say there's no need for that study. Over the last 30 years, China has raised 800 million people out of poverty. No need to study. The basic things to get people out of poverty are very clear. Social infrastructure, access to healthcare, access to education, food, potable water, create jobs. It's not simple, but it's basic. There's no need for any extreme study. What are we doing? The safety, do we have anything? You go to any hospital, do we have anything regarding social infrastructure, social welfare? We have absolutely nothing.
Well, you know, if you take this whole business of a poverty of the mind versus poverty of the pocket, you will see that they are actually quite related. And this is, I'm going to very dangerous territory here. you take the average Nigerian university teacher.
Very dangerous territory indeed.
You see, the fact that they are so poorly remunerated leads to certain conduct that translates to poverty of the mind that is exhibited in the work that they do and so on. So you can see a flow of this poverty thing. But bottom line, however, is that it's about education. If you're educated enough, your mind gets liberated. The question is, what kind of education liberates you? It is not that you have gone into some class and you become one of those certificated illiterates. That is the education you need to be liberated. I mean, I talk a lot about the pedagogy of the determined, which is one of my things about how you liberate the mind and use education to climb your way out of the current condition. But putting that aside, there is a critical problem of not recognizing the power of education. Look at what we commit to education, even in terms of material budget in our country. It's way off any prescription, whether it's a UNESCO prescription, common sense prescription.
So you're talking of breaking the cycle of poverty, yes. Because once you enter the poverty cycle,
it just continues.
It's a spin-off. And at that, once you're in the cycle of poverty, at some point, the amount of money you have becomes irrelevant, which is what you are talking about.
Yes, that's exactly that.
But before you get there, the reality is when you observe, or look, let's even ignore metrics, when you observe the lifestyles and of people, what can they afford? There are some very basic things that must be afforded. If you are below that line, you are extremely poor. Now, what we have done over the years, we've had all programs from 1972 and all of that, we kind of emphasize handouts.
Yeah.
You don't get people out of poverty by giving them money.
You give them
the ability to climb out of the cycle of poverty.
Education, perhaps that's where I have a problem. I have a problem, not necessarily what we have said, but with the attitude of the common person wanting to grab him or herself out of poverty. Because situations where stomach infrastructure, for instance, people want to embrace that over and above infrastructures that will bring development and this becomes something different.
This is my favorite territory, and some illustrations I like to use for this. But I think it may be best for us to go on a break and come back so we can start fresh on this, because a very important subject matter to deal with. how we break that mental set, that mindset that keeps us in this vicious circle of poverty. We'll be right back.
As many of us already know, Nigeria's poverty is very much tied to the lack of good roads, schools, and basic social amenities. And then there's also the Nigerian mindset, the tendency to focus just on short-term results and ignore future planning. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. Let's hear from you.
When the government is seen that way, it will be reduced. The number of people that are just striving to get there.
Yeah, my opinion as regard extreme poverty is where you really don't have enough to even make a day. I mean, one meal. I'm not even talking of 1 square meal a day. So probably that will amount to so many things regarding the health of that person too, and the thinking faculty to even produce anything. But the widening gap, I want to believe that it is widening because those hands that can really create wealth are made to dislike creating wealth because there are other options. You find area boys saying they can pay your salary. So it's like inviting people into these quicker ways of making money and not thinking of how to create that little income. And also, government itself is now taking from those who are really productive, and they are not putting it into the hands of those who can also be productive, but those who will just help them win elections and or what have you. They more or less waste the money. When they want to create wealth, they invest it outside the country. So you can understand the kind of problem. You are creating more unemployment. Those who really want to be productive, unemployment for them, whereas the employment is for those who will live on area boyism or just messing. Even you can experience it with buses. These downfall buses. You see those who are really working, they go out to make this money. The area boys and co will just come and take free lunch. They make even more than them. So if government continues to encourage this, the poverty gap will continue to widen. I mean, more extreme poverty will come.
A lot of citizens of this country actually are going through a low standard of living. They're extremely poor. They can't even afford even things they want. Even some of them cannot even afford 3 basic meals in a day. The president currently very soon will sign the budget for 2018. But let this thing be explicit enough. Let it be transparent. Let's know the plan actually involved, the spending plan involved in this budgeting. Because most times we just see cumbersome numbers, figures. But at the end of it, there's nothing that is coming up to us, we the masses. So based on this budgeting aspect of it, we need to know that whatever we're doing, we have to have it at the back of our mind that the masses are important, because these are the people you're serving. We are the citizens. We are the ones that vote for this government. And whatever thing you're doing, you have to put us at the back of your mind that you want to make our lives better. You want to make the standard of living better, and also you want to remove us from this extreme poverty that a lot of citizens of this country are actually suffering.
And we are back. This is still Patito's Gang, and we've been talking extreme poverty. I want to just open this section of prescription with an example or two that I've experienced. Years ago, my concern for poverty and extreme poverty led me to exploring what has been done around the world and physically entering to those spaces and engaging. One of the places I went to, besides India, is Bangladesh, to spend some time with one of the most successful NGOs in the world called BRAC. And one of the things that BRAC does is that it segments the poor into different groups. The base group is called the ultra poor. You see, the ultra poor are like those people in Tony's metaphor, the peasant who a ripple of water can drown. If you give them money to start a business, forget it. Because their immediate needs are such, they will quickly run and solve some problem and they use up the money and they can't do the business. So for the ultra poor, you don't even give them a loan. You give them an asset, like a cow. You teach them how to milk the cow. And you say to them, every day we'll drive up and pick up your bottles of milk and credit your account. That way they don't deal with money. If you give them money, they will not. But to then take it to another level of something that I have struggled with. Now, the Center for Values in Leadership started a program in Ajegunle years ago in which we tried to provide several months of training in entrepreneurship, in leadership, in basic values, in specific skills to some basic street kids, you know. We've seen many of them do remarkably well from the training they got. And we introduced this business of providing them some, at the end of training, some starter pack, which they then use to start that business. We moved this program to Delta, put 400 people in 4 different locations, 100 in each location, through this same kind of training, entrepreneurship, blah, blah, blah. The kind of training, if they came to Lagos Business School, would cost 2 million naira, each of those people. And they did it completely free. We gave them transport money. Our friends from India, from the Art of Living Foundation, said, that is not done anywhere in the world. They have to pay, they're getting value. I said, no. We just, these people, if you ask them to pay 1 kobo, they won't come. We gave them transport money. We fed them twice during the program for nearly 1 year. And we're going to say, we'll give them starter pack, which might be 100,000 naira or whatever, to start the business. They're killing themselves over the starter pack. Physical fights, all kinds of things. You realize, oh my God, these people are going to be poor forever, you know?
Yes.
Because they collect that starter pack, they go across the street, they sell it,
yes,
and they're back where they started.
Yes.
Whereas the value that was given to them is not considered the prime. That's not the key.
You see, so what you're just saying kind of remind me of the discussion going on in the United States as at then. The Democrats believe that the poor needs to be, that the welfare system needs to be reformed in order to help those who are considered poor in the United States, which means every month an individual who have signed into that will go to a center, collect money, collect cheese and all that. Why the Republicans are saying no? If you do that, these people will never get out of that cycle. So what do we have here in Nigeria? Infrastructure is not there. You see, it's difficult to see yourself as a rich person in Nigeria. You know why? Because your next door neighbor, just driving out of your driveway, you see poverty all over the place. And the mentality that these people have is that the country, the system have actually put in them where they are. So that is why those people whom you have taken your efforts to bring out of poverty level, trying to teach them how to learn one thing in order to help them, goes back to sell those things because they don't see value.
But that is one of the classic symptoms of poverty. The poor people cannot see value. So I'll give an example as well. I had a security guard in my office. Long story short, he wanted to borrow some money. And I gave him a deal. And I said, look, I had given him the money. And I called him about an hour later. And I said, I'm not really helping by lending him this money. He's going to blow it on a wedding. And I said, bring the money back. What he had saved about 50% of that. And I said, do your wedding within the 50%. In exchange, I will pay your first child's school fees through university. And he refused. He didn't refuse because he's wicked or stupid. He refused because he's poor. The poor man's eyesight cannot go beyond maximum 3 days.
Because his hygienic needs.
Yes, because you have not. So this is where the government has been a massive failure. You need to give these people a longer eyesight, so where the man knows, okay, you know what, for the next 1 month, my child is going to school because basic education is free. If I fall sick, basic health care is sorted out. I don't have to worry about traveling to get potable water. Then you increase his vision.
And
if you don't do that...
We can do all that. The government of Nigeria can do that.
Yeah, we know
but
that.
For some reason, they are not doing
What is that some reason?
The reason is this. The reason is that
the people in government are also poor.
I begin to feel that.
They're just poor people that have money.
No, they're wicked.
Yes.
I think they're wicked. I think it's wicked.
It's poverty. It's
because
not wickedness.
You cannot elevate somebody from poverty with the environment.
A poor person cannot remove a poor person from poverty. Yes. We have people that are poor that have money.
That's where the concept of poverty of the mind comes in. Yes. Because people don't. But it throws up an apparent paradox. For me, it's not a paradox at all. And this is the paradox of, if you will, cash transfers.
Conditional cash transfers.
No, some may not be conditional. Some may be conditional. Let's say cash transfers.
Okay.
But they become more valuable when they are conditional. The welfare scheme in America that he was referring to is a cash transfer. It might be in stamps, food stamps and all of that, but it's not conditional.
Yes.
So you have a conditional cash transfer. The Brazil example being perhaps the best known modern example that did a lot to help Brazil in the run of lifting people out of poverty. We know, however, that on the other hand, you could do a lot more for certain poor people if you do provide the infrastructure and the basics that will enable them to use their capacity to get their way out of poverty.
Yes,
but it seems to me now that when the cleverness comes in, and because we are having all this empower and this and this and this, where the cleverness really comes in is looking at the nexus where the so-called conditional transfer, one, increases spending and therefore stimulates economic activity. That as your purpose. You know,
there's a big but. But there's a big but. All of that has to sit on the fact that they are not spending on the infrastructure that the government should have provided. They should not be spending on sanitation, they should not be spending on shelter, they should not be spending on food, they should not spend on healthcare and education.
By the way,
the government needs to create that bottom safe. Because if you pick an extremely poor person in Nigeria, give him a British passport, don't give him any money, and drop him in London. His status changes immediately. Not about the money, it's about the availability of the infrastructure.
Yes. I agree with you 100% because that is what we
I think we are a long throw away from utopia. Okay.
I don't think so, actually.
Relative utopia. I still come back to my point. And you can put this to test. Give the average. Now, we used to think those in abject poverty and the people who have not gone to school and what have you, give the average graduate 2,000 naira. Give the conditionalities that you have mentioned. You will be shocked and surprised that the kind of project or the kind of things he or she will be going into will be the worst.
That's really part of the point that I was trying to make. Most people that are poor, let's even go beyond extreme poverty. People who are poor are actually people of quote-unquote average income who spend so much of what they earn in paying school fees for their children, in paying for healthcare, such that they don't have
taking care of
anything
dependents
left to really live.
Yes,
and so whereas they quote-unquote earn the so-called minimum wage, but they are below the poverty line.
To buttress that point, if you earn 100,000 a month, people will say you are not poor, but that's not correct. If you earn 100,000 a month, you have 3 children, a wife, and your parents and in-laws. The average revenue drops you below the poverty line.
Unfortunately, this is such an important subject matter, and our time is gone. But what is clear is that we need to do something dramatic about changing how we approach the issue of dealing with poverty. If China can lift 800 million people out of poverty in 30 years, and then you know who I give credit for all of that? Deng Xiaoping. And one of his most profound statements I like to repeat is that after Mao's mess, Deng, when he took over, said one of the biggest problems of our society is that we don't give enough credit to the value of intellectuals in society. Our party must change and use the value of people who think. That's what happened to China. Nigeria remains an anti-intellectual society, and people with the poverty of the mind run our country, and so we continue to be poor.
To recap, in order to get rid of physical poverty, we first need to get rid of our impoverished way of thinking. Well, that's all that we have time for today on Patito's Gang. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to follow us on all our social media pages so that you can join in on the conversation. I am Nenna Jimye. And until next time, take care and be well.